He who controls the minds controls the world. Here's your look at the McFarlane Toys DC Multiverse Omega. In a dystopian future, after the fall of the heroes, a new evil rose in Gotham City, calling himself Omega. Empowered with the anti-life equation, he reigns supreme over the entire East Coast. Now, Omega is rumored to have gained the means to control the minds of every living being on Earth, and it's up to Batman, Wonder Woman, and a band of new heroes to defeat the worst villain ever known and free the world. Before we get the review underway for Omega, the first thing we're going to want to do is measure off how tall the figure stands. Using technology from the not-so-distant future, I'm going to measure off to the very top of Omega's head. Stopping it right there. According to the readouts, Omega stands 7.1 inches in height. We can switch that to centimeters, and the figure stands 18.2 centimeters tall. It's a bit of a strange comparison, but it's the only figure that we've actually had a look at so far. So I'm going to move over Omega, and I'm going to bring in the rather impressive-looking Scarecrow. I really had a good time having a look at this figure. Now, obviously, it's hard to do a comparison in a case like this, simply because Scarecrow is missing his lower half. But, of course, you can kind of get a good idea just on their torsos how big the figures would be next to one another, if, of course, Dr. Jonathan Crane actually only had a lower half. Omega comes included with some swappable hands as well as a trading card, but I know you guys want to see the progress we're going to be making on Bane, so of course to come included with Omega, he comes with not one, but two legs. Now we'll go ahead and pick up these clompers. They're giant legs, good meaty-sized lower halves that of course we're going to attach onto the existing Bane that, as it stands right now, it's not really much to write home about. It's literally just his torso, no arms, no legs, and certainly no head. But we'll rectify at least the lower half of things as we have a look at the two legs. Now, just to give you guys a perspective of how big these legs are, if I put them next to Omega, for example, it goes almost up to his waist. So they are big-sized legs. Big, like I said, meaty drumsticks. We're going to go ahead and grab the torso from where we've left off, because obviously the only thing up to this point we've looked at is just the Scarecrow. So literally all we have is just this. I do again want to commend McFarlane Toys for the fact that they actually only released a 4-figure wave, so you don't have to track down 6 to 8 figures to build yourself Bane. You only really need to pick up 4 figures. Now, where we've left off, obviously, is the fact that we're going to be taking these legs and adding them to the lower half. As I always point out to my daughter, when you're putting on boots, make sure you put the curved part on the inside. So we're going to follow that. Now, to put this onto his torso, I think one thing that will be a bit of an issue is you can see this lower half of it. This part right here is a softer plastic, and what they've done is they've covered over, almost got a little bit of a rim around the peg area, to when you put the leg in, you sort of have to kind of get it underneath that plastic, and I don't even feel like it's really holding onto properly. So I may actually have to do this off camera. Apologies in advance. I may actually have to do that off camera because, like I said, I don't think the way I'm going about doing this right now, I can almost even tell myself in the back of my mind, you're not going to get these on. If you're planning on doing this on camera, you're not going to get these on. I mean, like right now, applying a little bit of pressure, it's almost as if the peg isn't the right size. I know it is. I think it's just a case where I have to kind of get it underneath this plastic. Maybe even if I just pry the plastic away a little bit and tuck the leg underneath that, then just wiggle it in place. So right now, we're not making much progress. Bit of a unfinished goal, unfortunately, but we're going to just put the parts to the side for the time being, and rest assured, by the time, and also this leg right here, by the time we actually get to the next figure in this wave, I'm going to leave it now, but you'll see some progress by the time we get to that next figure. That being said, let's get a closer look at the trading card that comes included with Omega. The same white border that we got with the Scarecrow, or really like most, if not all, the DC Multiverse figures. There have been some repaints where, of course, the border has been swapped out from white to silver, but generally you get like a very consistent looking card with every single figure release. Of course, on the front, you get the artwork for the actual character pulled from the comics. That looks like Deadshot in the back corner there. And then you flip it around. On the back, you get all the necessary stats for that particular character. The source, for example, is Batman Last Night on Earth, number 3, Comics 2020. Real name Bruce Wayne, height 6'2", and weight 210 pounds. I think perhaps on the back of the card they may have given away a little bit too much information. Anyways, we can put that to the side. He comes in, again, with some included swappable hands. Now, these hands are just basically very boring fists. I suppose there's nothing really wrong with fists if you want to put them on the figure themselves, but sometimes I actually go the route of more the dynamic hands that usually come with the figures as well. Boring fists isn't really my thing. If it is your thing, then by all means, you can swap the hands out and use these hands instead. To swap out the hands, and let me just actually show you what are currently the hands on the forearms. Like I said, these are much more interesting if you ask me. More like gestured hands. This hand actually kind of looks like it should be holding something, but unfortunately he doesn't come with any other accessories. I mean, literally the hands are the only thing he comes included with if you don't count the parts to put together Bane. But I really like these hands. I mean, that's good. That's some good posing hands right there. Again, if you want to swap out for the fist, all you have to do is just grab the forearm, pop that off like that, grab the necessary fist that you want to use. Make sure, of course, the thumbsies go in. Look at all this stuff we're learning here. And you can see that's what it looks like with the fist. I mean, they're pretty easy to change out hands, so I'll credit McFarlane Toys for making it super simple. I don't really have to force and struggle to pop these out. I can just easily pop out one and replace it with the other hand. Actually, this hand is a little on the loose side, really, now that I mention it. I mean, it stays in place, and it pegs in place fine, but I almost feel like it's too easy to remove the hands. Now, here I am finding fault with the fact that the hands are too easy to remove. Anyways, though, those are all the accessories that come included with Omega. Now let's get a closer look at the figure. Now, I have been a big fan of the design of Omega. I just love the sleek look of this particular character. Very much resonates still as a Batman-designed suit, but again, a very much augmented and futuristic design on this particular character. It still has the black calling card of the Bat logo that stretches from shoulder to shoulder. Very similar to almost like a Dark Knight Returns Bat logo. Very broad, very thick, and stretches again across the majority of his torso. I do like the meshing that they used for the gray, for example, and actually the coloring of gray is also a nice coloring too. It's hard to almost even read it here on camera, but it has a slight bit of almost a bluish tint to the gray. And even though it doesn't have a lot of additional coloring, you'll see, like, really when you look at the figure, front and back, there isn't really unnecessary or really it doesn't really have any additional coloring that you really have to expect to find. You know, sometimes when you pick up these figures for yourself, you sort of look at them and think, well, it would have been nice if they had added some additional shadowing or something just to add a little bit of darker contrast to the character. I don't feel like I'm thinking that at all when I'm looking here at Omega. There are, of course, things that I probably would have liked to have seen on the figure, for example, like using perhaps black pegs, because I feel like it should be a continuation of the black on the sides of his arms. The gray being used here, I feel kind of breaks it up a little bit. Yes, the detailing is more so to the side of his arm, but being that it overlaps the way that it does, it would have been nice if they had actually used black here instead of the gray. But you can see that it looks like on the back. It is really a neat designed costume, the way that it halves itself. Black on the outside, mesh gray on the inside. Of course, stretching across the entire body are sort of these rooted red areas, these panel lines of red that run across, like I said, from the bottom of his leg all the way up and all the way across his torso. Now for the legs, unfortunately, they've painted these in. As you get a little bit lower, further up on the torso, you can see that they're actually sculpted on the top half of it, that I wish they would have continued that trend further down as well. I guess it just made things a lot easier for them to stop the molding here and just simply paint this part of the red onto the figure. But I kind of wish that they would have raised this part too, just so it was consistent as you follow your eyes across the surface of the plastic. We didn't spend a whole lot of time talking about the head sculpt, but again, we'll have a look at that right now. I don't know why, it kind of reminds me of the Batman's, I think, bat armor that he wore at one point. Kind of very much reminds me of that design. Still very much a classic look for Batman, of course, with the smaller sized ears. And again, you got that panel lining that runs across the part of his head as well. Paint is very clean on this, so I would commend McFarlane Toys for actually doing a really good job on the paint. And granted, most of the paint, like all of this seems like it's paint right here. Even like this part looks like it's plastic. But by looking at the way that the light's bouncing off of the lower half of him with his legs, it looks like they've actually gone and painted the legs instead of actually using plastic. Or at least this part looks like it's painted in. But even like the panel lining, I will say that it's done pretty good. It's nice and clean. There's no breakup or mess of it. Red could so quickly find its way onto the areas of the black, And yet it's generally very clean on this figure, so again, points for that. If we spin the figure around, you have a much shorter cape. I've already played around with this a couple of times. You probably saw this in this review. It's a softer plastic. Obviously, because it doesn't stretch very far down, it doesn't impede at all when you start moving and rotating the figure. I like the design of this quite a bit. Spinning the figure around, let's have a look at the articulation here. Omega's head rotates all the way around because it's a ball joint. It hinges up and it hinges down. I was actually surprised because generally when you have a head sculpt like this, it does limit a little bit of posability when you attach it via the ball joint or ball peg. But I find like the head actually does hinge pretty high up and also hinges down pretty low as well. You can also rotate the head, like I said, all the way around. You can hinge it also back and forth. A good considerable head tilt, you can see right there. Then when it comes to his shoulders, the shoulders hinge out. Now I do find like the arms are a little loose on this figure. That may only just be this figure, not across the board. But it is a little loose right here. And I don't think it's necessarily the arm here. I think it's the cup joint that's holding the arm in the socket. I feel like that's a little on the loose side. But it does allow for a little bit of additional movement inward because, again, that socket joint just swivels inward as well. And the same rule applies when you bring those arms back. Because he does have that socket joint, means you can stretch the arms further back than what you normally would. Of course, within that, you've got the regular ball hinge joint, so it allows the arms to rotate all the way around, and those also move in and out. He has a swivel at the bicep, a double hinge on the elbow. Nothing really tight on this figure either as well. Hands rotate all the way around, and they also hinge back and forth. Though, again, going back to a point I mentioned before, the hands are very susceptible, at least this one, to popping off a little too frequent for my liking. As for his torso articulation, he doesn't have an upper torso ball joint. And he does also have a lower torso ball joint too. The legs split out. You almost get a full splits with Omega. You can move the legs forward. You can move the legs back. You can also swivel basically where that leg is attached to the ball peg. You can also double hinge on the knee. And then when it comes to his feet, now this whole lower half, there's no cut, so you can't swivel this part at all. However, he does have the hinge joint that allows the foot to go back and forth. And you can also rock it back and forth. And as you probably have already seen, which I did want to wait to show at the very end of this review, but he does also have toe articulation. So you can bend and hinge those toes as well. Omega is such a great looking figure. Based on really an already neat looking design, I think McFarlane Toys translated the design from the comics pretty good and faithful when we actually see here in plastic form. It may be a case where somebody may pass on this figure just based on the fact that they don't recognize and know Omega. But I would say other people may actually just pick it up based on the fact that they don't even know what the character is. And yet they like the design of it. It's sleek and futuristic, resembles, of course, still the designs of a classic bat suit. But it does bring a lot of different things to the table, things that we haven't really seen up to this point. And he does have all the necessary articulation to put this guy in some pretty good looking poses. And just in case, yes, you are curious, on the undersides of his feet, he does have the peg holes for, of course, the display stand, which is one thing, unfortunately, I didn't actually show you in this review. Reaching off to the camera, I can't even believe I forgot to leave that off. But it actually comes included with a display stand too. So going back to that point of having the feet, yes, he does have a display stand. Not really sure why I left that off at the beginning of this review, but Omega does in fact come with a display stand, the same style of display stand that we've seen with all the other DC Multiverse releases. Whew, that was close. We almost left that display stand completely out of this review, and I'm sure there would have been comments down below. Doesn't Omega, I'm pretty sure Omega comes with a display stand, and yes, I would have humbly had to I forgot to put the display stand in this review. Didn't do that. Rectified and fixed the problem right at the source. If you count the fact that he does come included with the black display stand, and yes, he comes included with those rather boring fisted hands, he doesn't come with really much of anything else other than his trading card. I guess he could have probably come included with some other accessories, but unfortunately he doesn't come included with that, but he does come included with the lower legs to further our continued build of Bane. Though I am looking at those legs again and know they're going to be a bit of an issue, a hassle to get those properly attached to the pegs. Leave it with me. Leave it with me. We're going to get that problem solved. I do like the sleek design of Omega here. The colors are simple and yet effective. The design of his costume as a whole really works well in the comics and works really well here in the figure as well. I like the fact that we have a different designed bat suit to some extent. One of which that looks like it definitely has more pulled from a futuristic era, which obviously Last Night on Earth is based from. I think it's a character that works very well for a particular figure release. And I think McFarlane Toys handled Omega really well. The posability is where it counts. He's a little loose, unfortunately, in the shoulders, but rest assured the rest of the figure, at least for me, I had tight joints everywhere else, especially on the knees. That was my one concern whenever it comes to opening up figures. I just say to myself, I hope he has tight knees. I hope he has tight knees. Hopefully one of these days, I'm not actually going to be saying that loudly. I hope he has tight knees. I hope he has tight knees. But this figure has tight joints everywhere where it counts. And even though technically he doesn't come with much in the way of accessories, he's a nice addition to my DC Multiverse wave. And we're also one figure down from finishing off our Bane. We still have to have a look at the Batman, and of course we still have to look at the Wonder Woman, but once that's all said and done, we can pack up shop and know that we've succeeded in building ourselves what I'm thinking is going to be a pretty neat looking Bane when it's all said and done. Have you picked up Omega for yourself? If so, let me know down below in the comments section what you guys think of the figure, or really based on this review as well. Also, if you are new to the channel, let's just say maybe you stumbled onto this channel with this review of Omega. But if you're liking all the stuff that you're seeing so far and you want to stay on board for future reviews, make sure you hit the subscribe button down below. Make sure you turn on the bell notification and make sure you come back to this channel Monday to Friday, 12 p.m. and 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Of course, on our to-do list is to finish off the rest of this multiverse wave. I know, of course, there are a few multiverse figures from previous wave that we still have to go and look at, but rest assured we will be having a look at that as well. We're working double time here, double time at the studio. Producer Tony sleeps half the time, so definitely lots of stuff coming your way, guys. Keep your peepers ever peeled to this channel, and thanks for watching as you always do. I'll see you guys next time.